Strip. The word came out of Master Sergeant Dane Hollis's mouth like he was ordering a beer and 200 people in that mess hall stopped chewing at the same time. The girl he said it to was 5'3", chestnut ponytail, olive green tee camo trousers, boots worn down at the heel. She set her fork on the tray very carefully, the way you set down something you might otherwise throw. Then she looked up at him and she smiled, and it was the wrong smile, the kind that made the men behind him take a step back before they understood why. "You sure about that, Sergeant?" I said strip. "Congratulations," she said. "You just ordered a Navy SEAL to strip." If a story about the cost of underestimating someone is worth 2 hours of your life, subscribe now and stay with me to the very end, because what happens after she lifts that shirt is not what anyone in that room expected. And drop the name of the city you're watching from in the comments. I want to see how far this one travels. 41 minutes before Dane Hollis destroyed his own life, with one sentence, he was in an excellent mood. It was Friday, payday Friday, the good kind, the kind where the mess hall at Joint Expeditionary Base Halloran Point ran loud and warm, and everyone's voice was pitched half a step higher than it needed to be. Hollis had a tray in one hand and an audience in the other, and he had spent 18 years learning exactly how much weight to put behind a joke so that the room laughed whether it wanted to or not. That was his real skill, not marksmanship, not leadership, volume and timing, and the instinct for who in a room could not fight back. He found her at the end of the serving line. She was small. That was the first thing, and for Hollis it was almost always the first thing. Small, young, pale, with a chestnut ponytail pulled up high and tight, in a face that belonged in a college lecture hall rather than a federal installation. Olive green t-shirt, camo trousers with the cuffs, bloused wrong, no, not wrong, he decided. Just casual, the way a person blouses their cuffs when they learned it from a photograph instead of a drill instructor. No rank, no name tape, nothing on her at all to tell him who she was, which to a man like Hollis was not a mystery. It was an invitation. "Costumes," he said loud enough to reach the back tables. "That's all a uniform is now. $40 at a flea market, and you too can play soldier on a Friday night." The laugh came. It always came. What did not come was the reaction he had already scripted in his head. The flinch, the flush, the frantic scramble for an explanation. She did not turn around. She picked up her tray. She stepped sideways to let the man behind her reach the coffee urn, thanked him with a nod, and walked to a two-seat table near the wall, like the entire building had gone quiet for reasons that had nothing to do with her. Hollis stood there holding his own tray, and something in his chest went sour. He had spent his whole career reading rooms, and he knew with the animal certainty of a man who has bullied his way through 18 years, that a joke ignored is a joke that turns on the teller. 12 seconds of that silence, and the laughter behind him would curdle into something else. Somebody would say, "Tough crowd." Somebody would smirk. And Dane Hollis had built an entire personality out of never once being the person somebody smirked at. So he followed her. He set his tray down across from hers without asking and dropped into the chair hard enough to make the table jump. "You didn't hear me." She looked up, green brown eyes steady, unhurried, and this was the part that stayed with 3 separate witnesses later, completely unafraid. Not brave, not defiant, simply not afraid, the way you are not afraid of weather. "I heard you, Sergeant." "Then answer." "You didn't ask a question." Somebody at the next table made a small, strangled noise into their soda. Hollis heard it. That was the moment the evening tipped, though nobody in that room knew it, yet least of all him. He had come over to reclaim a laugh. Now he needed to win. "All right." He leaned back, spread his arms across the chair backs on either side of him, made himself as wide as the space allowed. "Who are you?" "Calloway." "Calloway what?" "Ren Calloway." "Rank." She took a bite of her food, chewed, swallowed. "I'm attached temporary." "That's not a rank." "No," she agreed, "it isn't." The table behind Hollis had gone quiet, so had the two beyond it. That was the thing about a mess hall on a Friday night. Silence travels outward in rings, and by the time you notice it, it's already reached the walls. Staff Sergeant Camille Rourke arrived the way weather fronts arrive, which is to say she had been coming for a while and only became visible at the end. Rourke was 31 and had spent every one of the last 9 years being the hardest person in whatever room she walked into, because she had learned early that a woman who is merely competent gets talked over, and a woman who is frightening does not. She had made herself frightening. It had cost her friends 2 relationships and the ability to sit through a meal without scanning for threats to her own authority. She saw the small girl at the table with Hollis, and she felt immediately and physically the thing she always felt. There is only room for one of us, and it will be me. She came around the table and stood at Wren's shoulder close enough to crowd. Sweetheart, Rourke said, and she made the word land like a slap. Do you have the faintest idea what building you're standing in? The mess hall, Wren said. On a federal installation. Yes. So you have credentials? I do. Show me. Wren wiped her hands on a napkin. She reached into her hip pocket, and she did it slowly, and she did it with her fingers spread the way a person moves when they have spent a great deal of their life around people who are jumpy about hands going into pockets. Nobody in the mess hall registered that detail. One person did. He was sitting in the corner with a folded newspaper, and he had not turned a page in 11 minutes. She put a small sheaf of papers on the table. They were soft at the corners from being carried. Rourke picked them up with 2 fingers like they might be contaminated. She had already prepared her face for the moment she would announce loudly that these were expired or forged or the wrong form entirely. She had the sentence built. She had the volume set. Then she actually read them. The top sheet was not orders. It was a chain of custody record. Columns, dates, initials, a serial block at the top, lot 4471, and a long ladder of signatures descending the page like rungs. Rourke's eyes went down the ladder because that is what eyes do. And about 2/3 of the way in the receiving column, in the small cramped capitals of a man who wrote the same 3 letters 10,000 times a year, was D. Hollis. Rourke's brain did what brains do when they are handed something they were not built to receive at that particular moment. It refused it. She had come over here to humiliate a girl. She had a script. There was no line in the script, for the paper in my hand has my superior's signature on it, and I don't know why. She read it again. Same thing. What is this? She said, and the change in her voice was so slight that only 2 people caught it. One was Wren, the other was the man with the newspaper. Paperwork, Wren said. This isn't orders. No, then where are your orders? Somewhere they can be verified, Wren said, which is why they're not in my pocket in a mess hall. Rourke stood there with the pages in her hand and felt the floor move under her, very slightly in a direction she could not name. She did the only thing available to a person who has lost the thread and cannot afford to be seen losing it. She dropped the papers back on the table. Junk, she announced to the room too loud. She's carrying junk. And Wren gathered the pages, squared the edges against the tabletop with 2 neat taps, and slid them back into her pocket. And she said nothing at all, because she had just learned something worth more than any argument she could have won. Rourke did not know. Rourke had held lot 4471 in her and seen Hollis's name on it and felt nothing but confusion, which meant Rourke was not part of it, which meant Wren could use her. 11 days. That was how long Wren Calloway had been on Halloran Point. And in those 11 days, she had eaten 131 meals worth of insults and said thank you to every single one of them. She had been called a tourist, a groupie, somebody's daughter, a dependent who wandered. She had been asked twice if she was lost, and once by a man who thought he was being charming, whether she was the entertainment. She had absorbed all of it with the same flat courtesy, and every night she had gone back to a room in transient quarters and sat on the edge of a bunk and rolled her left shoulder until the ache in it went from a knife to a bruise. The shoulder was 14 months old. It had been rebuilt twice. The surgeon had told her gently in the voice they use when they think you're going to argue that the joint would never again do what it had done before, and Wren had said okay and then gone home and thrown up. She did not think about the shoulder often. She thought about the reason for it constantly. 11 names. She carried them everywhere in a place nobody could see, and she had learned to run the list the way other people run rosary beads, in order, always in order, because the order was the order they had been pulled out in, and to say them in any other sequence felt like lying. 96 hours. That was the other number she carried. 96 hours until a shipment left the pier at Norfolk, and after that it would be on water, and after that it would be somewhere she could never reach it, and 11 names would stay what the reports said they were. Training accident. She had read that phrase so many times the letters had stopped meaning anything. So when Dane Hollis called her a costume in front of 200 people, Ren Calloway did not feel humiliated. She felt the clock. Hey, Corporal Tobias Nash had a beer gut he was in denial about, and a base record he was not. 18 seconds, M4 full field strip, and reassemble achieved 4 years ago, on a good day with a weapon he had personally maintained, and he had told the story so many times that in the current version, there had been a stopwatch, a crowd, and a bet. Nash was not cruel. That was what made him worse in a way, because cruelty at least announces itself. Nash was just a man who liked being in the fun part of the room, and the fun part of the room right now was over here. He straddled a chair backward 2 tables away. Serious question. Okay, Ren said. You know any drill because you're wearing the trousers. He grinned, spreading his hands, playing to the tables around him. I'm not being a jerk. I'm curious. Somebody hands me a chef's coat I can't cook. There was a general noise of appreciation. It was a good line. Nash had been waiting all week to use it on somebody. Ren looked at him for a second and a half. In that second and a half, she made a calculation that would eventually cost 4 men their careers and 1 man his freedom. And it went like this. I have 96 hours. Hollis is the receiving signature. Rourke is clean. Nash is nothing. And there is a man in the corner with a newspaper who has not turned a page since I sat down, and if I want him to move, I need to be interesting. Sure, she said. Ask. Ask what? Give a command. The mess hall's noise level dropped again, another ring outward. Nash's grin faltered because he had expected her to laugh it off, and now he was standing at the edge of something. All right, attention. She was already up. Not fast. That was what got them. She did not leap or scramble. She rose out of the chair in one economical movement, and her heels came together with a click that carried to the back wall, and her hands went flat against her thighs with the thumbs along the seam, and her chin came level and her eyes fixed on a point 4 feet above Nash's head, and she stopped. Absolutely stopped. Not a tremor, not a sway, the kind of stillness that only exists in people who have been made to hold it until holding it stopped costing anything. Somebody's fork hit a plate. Okay, Nash said. His voice had gone thin. Okay, about face. She did it. Left toe behind, right heel, pivot. 180 degrees, and her ponytail swung once and settled, and she was motionless again, facing the opposite wall. And there was no laughter anywhere in that mess hall now, none at all, because 200 people had all just watched something that did not fit. Present arms. Her hands came up and shaped themselves around a rifle that was not there. And the thing that made 3 separate soldiers in that room go quiet for the rest of the night was not the position. The position was textbook. Anyone learn a position, it was her hands. The left one closed with the fingers already curled to a handguard diameter. The right one found a spot and locked thumb-wrapped wrist angled, and it did not adjust. It did not search. It went where it went because it had gone there so many thousands of times that her body no longer consulted her about it. Nash stood up so fast his chair fell over. Lucky guess. Hollis said it into the silence, and it sounded exactly as stupid as it was. He knew it the second it left his mouth. He watched it land in a room of 200 people who had just seen something they could not explain, and he felt the first cold thread of a feeling he had not experienced in almost 20 years, the feeling of the room deciding it did not agree with him. Somebody near the drink station laughed. Not at Ren. Hollis's head came around like a turret. Something funny specialist. No sergeant. Didn't think so. But it was out now, that laugh, and it had gotten into the air, and Hollis could feel every man in his section recalibrating. He had spent nearly 2 decades making sure nobody in his orbit ever got to that thought. Maybe he's not actually the hardest guy here. And now a 110-pound girl in a flea market t-shirt had put the thought in the room by doing absolutely nothing, except standing still very, very well. He needed to break her immediately in public. That is the entire psychology of what happened at Halloran Point that Friday, and every investigator who read the file afterward reached the same conclusion. In more words, Dane Hollis did not escalate because he suspected Ren Calloway of anything. He escalated because 200 people had watched her not care what he thought, and he could not survive that. At ease, Nash said, and then immediately went red because he had no authority to put anyone at ease, and everyone knew it. Ren came out of present arms and stood at rest and picked her fork back up, and that was the worst part for Hollis, that she just went back to eating, that the whole thing had cost her nothing. Rourke leaned down toward Hollis's ear. Sergeant. What? Those papers she had. What about them? Rourke hesitated. Every instinct she had was telling her to say your name was on them, and every instinct she had was also telling her that a woman in her position does not hand a superior a question he doesn't want. She had been squeezing herself into that shape for 9 years. She chose the shape. Nothing, she said. Junk. 14 months later, she would sit in front of a review board and be asked why she did not report what she saw, and she would answer honestly, and the honest answer would be the single most painful sentence of her life, because I wanted him to like me more than I wanted to be right. The next part happened because a 19-year-old was thirsty. Private Eli Sandoval had been in the chow line the whole time. He had watched from the beginning Hollis's joke, the girl not turning around Rourke circling Nash in the drill, and he had felt his stomach getting smaller the entire time. Sandoval was not brave. He would have told you that himself. He had joined 14 months ago for reasons he never said out loud, and he had spent basic keeping his head down and his mouth shut and had continued the policy since. He was good at being invisible. It had kept him whole. But he had a brother. He'd had a brother. Marcus, 6 years older, loud, the kind of person who filled a doorway. Marcus had been the one who told him there's people who talk and people who step, and you're going to be a stepper, Eli, I can tell. And 14 months ago, two men in dress uniform had come to his mother's house and used the phrase training accident, and Eli had been standing in the kitchen doorway when his mother's knees went and he had not made it across the room in time to catch her. He carried that, the not making it in time. So he took an extra cup from the stack, filled it with water, and walked it over to the table where the small woman was eating alone in a silent room, and he set it down in front of her. Ma'am, his voice cracked in the middle of the word, and he hated himself for it. It's just water. Wren looked at the cup, then at him, and something moved across her face, fast gone, almost before it arrived, but Sandoval saw it, and he spent the rest of his life unable to describe it properly. He tried later in a report, and the best he came up with was she looked like she recognized me. Thank you, Private, she said. Sandoval. Thank you, Private Sandoval. Behind him, Hollis took out a small notebook. He did it slowly. He made sure people saw. He clicked a pen and he wrote, and he read it aloud as he wrote it letter by letter in a pleasant conversational tone. Sandoval. The mess hall went very still. Got it, Hollis said, and clicked the pen shut and smiled at the boy. That was the thing about Dane Hollis that nobody in his section could ever quite articulate to outsiders. He never actually threatened anybody. He just wrote your name down and let your imagination do the work. It was efficient. It had never once failed. Sandoval's ears went scarlet. His hands started shaking, and he pushed them into his pockets so nobody would see. And he stood there in the middle of the floor, understanding that he had just traded something he could not afford for a cup of water that cost nothing. He did not walk away. That was the part he would be proudest of years later. Not the water, the not walking away. Wren picked up the cup and drank half of it and set it down. Sergeant Hollis, she said. The room turned. You're going to want to spell it right, she said, if you're keeping records. That was when Julian Pike folded his newspaper. He had been sitting alone in the corner for 50 minutes with a coffee going cold and a paper he was not reading. He was a compact man in civilian clothes, mid-40s contractor badge clipped to his belt, where nobody would look twice at it, and he had the specific gray anonymity of a person who has spent a career being the least memorable individual in every room he has ever entered. Pike worked for the Meridian Halcyon Group. His title was security liaison. What he actually did was make sure that the things Meridian Halcyon shipped kept shipping, and that anyone who asked why they kept shipping stopped asking. He had come to Halloran Point 11 days ago because a flag had tripped on an access query. Somebody had pulled the certification file on lot 4471 and pulled it from inside the fence and pulled it at 0300, and Pike had been on a plane by noon. Pike had spent those 11 days looking for a middle-aged investigator with a rented sedan and a bad haircut. He had checked visitor logs and rental agreements in the parking lot by the JAG building. He had found nothing, and it had been making him irritable. And the irritation was the first mistake he made, because irritated men look for confirmation instead of information. Then a master sergeant had shouted at a small woman in the chow line, and out of pure boredom, Pike had watched. And in 50 minutes, he had watched her clear a room with her eyes twice without seeming to move them. He had watched her hand go into her pocket with the finger spread. He had watched her come to attention like a machine coming online. And he had watched her just now pick a fight with the biggest man in the building on behalf of a private she did not know in a room with 200 witnesses and at least 40 phones. Pike folded his paper and set it on the table, and for the first time in 11 days he smiled. There you are. He got it exactly precisely backward. He looked at a woman who had just made herself the most visible person on the installation and concluded that she had lost control of her cover. He did not consider the alternative. Men like Pike almost never do because the alternative requires you to believe that someone smaller than you has been letting you be right on purpose. Disarm. Hollis felt the evening slipping and reached for the only tool he had ever owned. Nash. Sergeant. You still got that record, 18 seconds. Nash's face did something complicated. Yeah. Base record. Hollis announced, opening his arms to the room, reeling the audience back in the way a man pulls in a line. 4 years, nobody's touched it, and our guest here, he gestured at Wren with an open hand, generous, magnanimous, a host introducing a performer. Our guest here can do drill. Beautiful drill. Best drill I've seen in a while, honestly. He waited. Someone laughed nervously. He accepted it. So let's find out if there's anything under it. Wren set down her fork. Training weapons in the cage, Hollis said. Nash has the key. No ammunition anywhere near it. Everybody relax. He turned to the room and did the thing he was genuinely good at. He made a crowd feel like accomplices instead of witnesses. Nobody's forcing anybody. She's welcome to say no. Aren't you, sweetheart? 200 people looked at her. And Wren Calloway thought about a shipping manifest in a pier. In 96 hours, and a man in the corner who had just folded his newspaper, and she understood with total clarity that she was being handed the only thing she had not been able to obtain in 11 days of quiet, careful, invisible work. Nash was about to open the weapons cage. The weapons cage that had received a delivery 6 weeks ago. The weapons cage with a receiving signature that read, D. Hollis. No, she said. I'm not going to say no. Hollis grinned, victorious, feeling the room come back to him at last. Atta girl. Sergeant and Wren said, and she stood, and she picked up the cup of water Sandoval had brought her and finished it and set it down neatly in the center of the table. One question first. Go ahead. When you sign for a delivery, she said, do you count it or do you just sign? The grin stayed on Hollis's face for another full second, the way a building stays standing for a moment after the charges go off. Then it came apart. He did not know why. That was what he would tell them later over and over in 3 separate interviews, and every single time he would be telling the truth. I didn't know why. I just knew right then that something was very wrong, and I could not have told you what it was. Because Dane Hollis had signed for a great many things in 18 years without counting them. It was not corruption. It was not even laziness, really. It was the way a man moves through a career when he has decided that the details are somebody else's job. And the important thing is that the clipboard gets back to the office by close of business. He had signed for lot 4471 6 weeks ago at 4 in the afternoon on a day he did not remember without opening a single crate. And then he had gone home and grilled chicken. He looked at the small woman across the table. What did you just ask me? You heard me, Sergeant. Who are you? And Wren Calloway smiled at him, the first real one, small and tired and about 14 months old, and said, nobody. That's the whole point. Nash went for the keys. Rourke went with him because she needed to be moving, because standing still had begun to feel like admitting something. Sandoval did not move at all. 200 people stayed exactly where they were, and the ones near the doors did not leave, and the ones with food left it because everybody in that room had now arrived at the same wordless understanding. Whatever this was, it was not over, and you would want to be able to say you had seen it. Phones were coming out, 11 of them by the eventual count. 9 would end up as evidence. 2 would be deleted at 0400 by people who understood far too late what they had recorded. And in the corner, Julian Pike stood, put $4 under his cold coffee cup, and walked toward the door. Not fast, not slow, a man was somewhere unremarkable to be. He had seen enough. He had identified the problem. He would now make a phone call, and the phone call would move a shipment date forward, and that decision made in a stairwell at 1912 hours on a Friday by a competent man who had drawn a confident conclusion from complete information and gotten it exactly wrong would be the reason Julian Pike spent the rest of his natural life in a federal facility in Kentucky. Wren watched him go without appearing to watch him go. Then she rolled her left shoulder once, because it hurt, because it always hurt, and she followed Master Sergeant Dane Hollis toward the weapons cage. Both men in that room believed they were the hunter. Only one of them was right. Sandoval caught up with her in the corridor, and she did not slow down for him. "Ma'am, keep up." "Ma'am, I don't have authorization for anything." "You have legs," Wren said. "Right now, that's the whole job." He kept up. 19 years old, 6 weeks past his first real duty assignment, running down a hallway behind a woman he had handed a cup of water to 48 minutes ago. And the only thought in his head was a stupid one, a small one, the kind that arrives when the big ones are too heavy to lift. Marcus would have liked her. "Ops shack," Wren said. "Where?" "Left, then the show me." Rourke had the terminal up before they got through the door. She had run the whole way, and she was breathing like it, and she did not stop typing. "Berth 12 outbound tonight. I've got okay. Okay, here it is." Her hand stopped. "Container's already sealed." "When?" 1951. Wren looked at the clock on the wall. "That's 9 minutes ago." "Yeah. Seal number." Rourke read it off. Wren didn't write it down. Sergeant pulled a seal number that was assigned to that container when it was booked in April. "That's a different screen." "Pull it." Rourke pulled it. She read it. She read it again. And then she sat back from the keyboard about 4 inches the way people do when a machine tells them something they don't want. "They don't match," she said. "No, that's ma'am. That's not a clerical thing. That's not a typo. A seal number is a seal number. You can't." Rourke's voice was climbing. "Somebody cut that seal off and put a new one on and typed a new number into my system tonight on my terminal from my yard." "Yes." "Who's login?" And Rourke checked, and her face did something complicated, and Wren already knew what she was going to say. "Mine," Rourke said. "No." There was a full second where nobody said anything. Then Rourke shoved back from the desk and stood up and put both hands on top of her head, and the sound she made was pure animal panic, and it was the first genuinely honest noise she had made all night. "I didn't, ma'am. I have never." "I know. That's my card. That's my pin. That's Sergeant Rourke." Wren didn't raise her voice. "When did you last badge into the yard office?" "Tuesday. Tuesday morning. I did the quarterly." She stopped. "There was a contractor rep in there, sitting at the end of the table doing nothing. He asked me about the coffee machine. Compact guy, 40s, nothing face." "Yeah." "How was reading your keystrokes?" Wren said. "It takes about 11 seconds if you're any good, and he's very good, and he didn't do it because he suspected you of anything. He did it because you're the property book NCO, and he collects things he might need later. That's the entire job. That's what a security liaison actually is." Rourke's hands came down off her head. "He set me up." "He gave himself an option," Wren said. "You only became a setup about 20 minutes ago when he found out I'm real," Sandoval said quietly from the doorway. "So if this goes wrong," Wren said, "there's a woman with 9 years in and a bad reprimand from tonight who lied about a document in front of 200 witnesses and whose login altered a federal shipping seal at 1951. That's not a bad frame, Private. That's a good one. That would hold." Rourke sat back down very slowly. "Then why are you still standing here talking to me?" She said, "Instead of arresting me." And Wren said, "Because you ran here." Have you ever had one thing you did in your worst hour be the only thing that saves you camp watching? Because in about 40 minutes, everybody in this story finds out what they're actually made of, and 2 of them are wrong about themselves. The clock said 2003. "Talk to me," Wren said. 6 hours is a lie. What's the real number?" Rourke was already scrolling. "Vessel 0200, but the terminal cuts the gate at 2300 for the stack sequence, and once it's in the stack, it's not a container anymore. It's a row and a tier and a bay, and you'd need a crane and a terminal supervisor and about 4 hours to get at it. So 2300. So 2300, Rourke said. "You've got 2 hours and 57 minutes. "No," Wren said. "I've got less than that." "Why by him?" "Because he's not going to leave a swap seal sitting in a stack for 3 hours where anybody with a bolt cutter in a bad mood can look at it." She was already at the door. "He's going to stand there and watch it go in. He is physically at that terminal right now, Sergeant. He has to be. It's the only part of this he can't do from a phone." Sandoval said, "Then we call the terminal. We call the Port Authority. Ma'am, we call somebody, we tell them stop the box. And Ren stopped in the doorway and turned around and said the thing that put the whole night in a different shape. On what grounds private? Sandoval opened his mouth. Say it out loud, Ren said. Pretend I'm a duty officer at the Port Authority, and it's 8 o'clock on a Friday. Go. There's the seal numbers don't match. Clerical error. Happens 40 times a week. Terminal's response is thank you, we'll note it. The equipment's defective. Prove it. The certification's fake. Whose signature is on the certification? Sandoval stopped. Say it, Wren said. Colonel Teague's. So your call goes, a private from Halloran Point would like the Port of Norfolk to halt a federal shipment because his own installation commander signed a bad waiver. Wren let that sit for exactly 1 second. Now imagine you're the guy who takes that call. What do? Sandoval's shoulders dropped. I call the installation. You call the installation, Wren agreed, and you ask to speak to the commander. And the commander is the guy on the form, Rourke said from the terminal. Jesus? That's why he did it this way, Wren said. That's why he didn't need to bribe anybody. He built it so that every single door out of this leads back to a man who has a very good reason not to open it. Colonel Abram Teague was standing in the corridor outside the ops shack. Nobody had heard him come. He had been there long enough to hear most of it, and he was holding a phone in his hand that was not lit up, and his face was the face of a man who had spent the last 11 minutes in the worst room in his own head. Petty officer. Sir? Say the last part again. Sir. Say it. Wren turned and faced him square. The reason this works, sir, is that stopping it requires you to make a phone call that ends your career. They didn't buy you. They just made sure that the cheapest thing you could possibly do at every single point from here forward is nothing. Teague nodded slowly. How long have they had that on me? Since March, sir. And you've known for 11 days. 9, sir. 9 days. He almost laughed. It was a terrible sound. You've been eating in my chow hall for 9 days, knowing that, and you didn't come to my office. No, sir. Why not? And Wren said, because I couldn't tell yet whether you'd pick up the phone or pick up a shredder, sir. And if I'd guessed wrong, I'd have lost 11 names. Teague looked at the phone in his hand. Rourke, watching from the terminal, said later that she had never in her life been more aware of a silence. Nobody moved. Sandoval had gone rigid, and Abram Teague, 55 years old, 31 years and 2 daughters, and a plaque from a battalion he'd taken to Ambar, stood in a corridor at 2006 hours on a Friday and did the arithmetic that Julian Pike had banked on him doing. If he called the port, he'd have to identify himself. If he identified himself, the first question would be, what's the basis for the hold? And the honest answer to that question was, I signed a fraudulent certification waiver in March without reading it. He would say that sentence into a recorded line. It would be transcribed. It would be in front of a board inside of a month. And every good thing he had done in 31 years would become a paragraph of context in a document about the worst 4 seconds of his life. He knew all of that. He dialed anyway. Port of Norfolk duty desk, he said. This is Colonel Abram Teague, commanding Joint Expeditionary Base Halloran Point. I need to place an administrative hold on an outbound container at berth 12. A pause. The basis is a fraudulent certification waiver on the lot inside it. Another pause. He closed his eyes. The waiver carries my signature. I signed it. I'm the reason you're getting this call, and I'll give a full statement to whoever needs one. Wren did not move a muscle. Rourke put her hand over her mouth. And Teague listened for 11 seconds, and then he said, say that again. He lowered the phone. The hold's already on it, he said. Wren's head came up. What? Placed at 1959, 4 minutes after the seal swap. Teague was staring at nothing. Requested by a Meridian Halcyon compliance officer. Pending internal quality review. The room went absolutely still. He put a hold on his own container, Rourke said. Yes, Wren said, and there was something in her voice now that hadn't been there all night. Yes, he did. Why would he? Because a hold takes it out of the stack sequence, Wren said. It comes off the outbound list. It gets moved to the inspection lane where there's no crane, no terminal supervisor, and about 2 guards on a Friday night. That's worse for him, Sandoval said. Isn't that worse for him? It's just sitting there. It's sitting there where he can get to it, Wren said. And then she said it, and everybody in that corridor understood at once. He's not shipping it. He's emptying it. Time. The clock said 2011. How far, Wren said. Berth 12 at this hour, no traffic. Rourke was already pulling it. 26 minutes. How many people can you put in a vehicle in 4 minutes? Rourke looked at Teague. Teague did not hesitate. Sergeant, take whoever's standing in that chow hall and wants to go. Sir, that's not... Sergeant Rourke. Teague's voice went flat and hard, and 31 years old. In about 90 minutes, there is going to be a federal investigation of this installation, and I am going to be the primary subject of it, and I am telling you on the record in front of witnesses to put personnel in vehicles and support a Navy petty officer executing a lawful hold on defective material. If I'm wrong, it's mine. Go. Rourke went, and Teague turned to Wren and said the last thing she expected. Take Hollis. Wait. She stopped. Sir, take him. Sir, with respect, he's a liability. He signed the retrograde, Teague said. He's the only person on this installation who has personally handled that lot at both ends. If that container is being emptied tonight, then in about a year, somebody is going to have to stand in a room and say what was in it, and there is exactly one man alive who can say, I signed those 7 crates out, and here is what was in them, and here is what I did wrong. Wren said nothing. And petty officer, Teague's voice cracked just slightly. He is going to spend the rest of his life being the man who told a woman to strip in a chow hall. That's already true. That's permanent. The only thing left that he gets any say in is whether that's the only thing. Hollis was sitting alone at the table where she'd been eating. 200 people had cleared out around him in a perfect circle. Nobody had told him to. He was sitting with his forearms on the table and his hands folded, and he had not moved in 20 minutes. And when Wren came through the door, he flinched, physically flinched a man his size the way a dog flinches. Get up. He looked at her. On your feet, Sergeant. I'm not going anywhere near you, Hollis said. That's not on offer. You don't get it. His voice came out ruined. You don't. I said it twice. I said it in front of my daughter's 14. My daughter is 14 years old, and by Monday she is going to have seen a video of her father telling a woman to take her shirt off. And there is no version of the rest of my life where that is not the first thing anybody knows about me. So no, ma'am, I am not going to go be useful for you so you can feel. Sergeant, so you can feel like the story has a nice shape. Dane, he stopped. I don't care about your shape, Wren said. I'm not here to redeem you, and I'm not going to. You're finished. You were finished at 1932, and nothing that happens tonight changes it. Hollis stared at her. But there are 7 crates, she said, that you personally signed out to a yard in April, and a man is standing next to them right now with a pry bar. And in 26 minutes, I need somebody who can look inside a container and tell me whether what's in there is what left this base. That's it. That's the whole job. It fixes nothing, it forgives nothing, and Monday still happens. Then why would I do it? And Wren Calloway said, because Marcus Sandoval's little brother is in the truck. Then Hollis got up. He did not say anything. He walked past her to the door, and he was moving fast by the time he hit the corridor, and Wren went after him, and neither of them ever spoke about that conversation again for as long as they lived. The clock said 2015. They took 3 vehicles. Rourke drove the first one with Wren beside her and Sandoval and Nash in the back. Hollis rode in the second with 4 soldiers who did not look at him once. The third had 6 people in it who had been eating dinner an hour ago and had volunteered without any of them being entirely able to explain why. Nash spent the first 8 miles saying nothing at all and then said out of nowhere, 18 seconds. Nobody answered him. I've been telling that story for 4 years, Nash said. I've told it at 3 duty stations. It to my wife's father. He rubbed his face with both hands. Ma'am, when you were doing it, you weren't looking at your hands. No. How come? And Wren, watching the road, said, because at night you can't see them. Nash didn't ask anything else. Sandoval leaned forward at mile 14. Ma'am, can I ask you something? Yes. You said you were the 12th. Yes. So you were on the He couldn't get the word out. You are on the same stick, Wren said. Same aircraft. Same night. Then how come you're... Because I went out last, Wren said. And that was the whole thing right there, and the truck went very quiet, and Rourke's hands tightened on the wheel. Jumpmaster goes with the stick, Wren said. I was assistant. My job was the tail. 11 out than me. And the rig they were on, the harness assemblies, the quick release hardware, all of it came off a lot that Meridian Halcyon certified without testing, because testing costs money and a certificate costs a printer. Nobody breathed. Number seven's harness let go about 200 feet up, Ren said. That's your brother. That's Marcus. And when it went, he was still on the strap, and it took my shoulder with it on the way past. And I went out anyway because I was already committed, and there was nothing under me to stop for. Sandoval made a sound. He didn't do anything wrong, Ren said. That's what I want you to have. That's what I came here to be able to hand you. 14 months of people saying training accident, like your brother was careless, and he was not careless, private. He did every single thing right, and a piece of hardware that a man in an office decided not to test came apart at 200 feet. Ma'am, and I have carried his name up my spine for 11 months, Ren said, because I put the tattoo on the day the second lot shipped, and I did it so that every morning when I got dressed, I would remember that they didn't stop. Rourke pulled into the terminal at 2039. There was a gate guard, and Teague's call had already reached him, and he waved them through with the specific, bewildered courtesy of a man who has been told to expect something and cannot believe it has actually arrived. Inspection lane, Rourke said, 2 rows over. And Ren said, everybody stop. 3 vehicles stopped. Listen to me very carefully because this is the part that decides it. She turned around in her seat. Nobody touches that container. Nobody goes near it. Nobody says a word to anybody standing next to it. Nash said, ma'am, what? He has a hold on it, Ren said. A lawful file documented compliance hold with his company's name on it. Right now, tonight, that box legally belongs to Meridian Halcyon's quality review process. And if 14 soldiers from an Army installation cut a seal on it, then everything inside becomes contaminated evidence, and this ends. Tonight. Forever. So what do we do? And Ren opened the door. We watch him work, she said, and we let him finish. Oh. Rourke said, you're going to let him empty it? Yes. Ma'am, that's the evidence. No, it isn't. Ren was out of the vehicle now, and she was scanning, and Rourke had never seen a person's eyes moving like that. Sergeant, listen. A container full of defective harness hardware, evidence of a crime. It's evidence of an inventory. Every single piece in there has paperwork saying it's fine, and that paperwork is going to hold up because it was designed by lawyers to hold up, and a defense expert will stand in a courtroom and say the lot passed, and here is the certificate. Then what's evidence? A man, Ren said, in a rental car at 9 o'clock at night with a case of issued federal seals in his trunk and 40 pounds of harness hardware he has personally removed from a container that his own company placed under hold. Rourke's mouth came open. You can argue about a certificate for 3 years, Ren said. You cannot argue about a man with a bag. Hollis came up from the second vehicle at a jog. Ma'am, there's a car. Where? 2 rows down from the box. Backed in. Trunks open. He was breathing hard and his voice had steadied out into something functional. And there's a guy walking crates. How many trips has he made? I counted 3 since we pulled in. Then he's about halfway, Ren said. Sergeant Nash. Ma'am, you've been looking at those crates for 6 weeks. Yes, ma'am. When he opens that trunk again, I need you close enough to read a stamp and far enough that he doesn't see you. Can you do that? Nash swallowed. Yeah. Sergeant Hollis. Hollis's jaw worked. You signed those crates out of a yard in April, Ren said. When this is over, somebody with a badge is going to ask what was in them, and you are going to answer that question honestly, and it is going to be the end of you. Do you understand what I'm asking? And Dane Hollis, who had 94 minutes earlier told a woman to strip in front of 200 people, said, yes, ma'am. Say it back. I'm going to tell them I signed for 9 crates I never opened, Hollis said. His voice did not shake. And I'm going to tell them I signed 7 of them back out in April without opening those either. And I'm going to say it in a room out loud with my name on it. Yes. And it doesn't fix anything. No, Ren said, it doesn't. Hollis nodded once. Okay, he said. It was 2047. Ren moved out along the row with Sandoval 2 steps behind her, and she stopped at the corner of a stack, and she looked down the lane, and there he was. Julian Pike in shirt sleeves working. Han had a crate on a hand truck and a bag over his shoulder, And he was moving with the unhurried competence of a man doing an ordinary task because that was what he had been doing for 11 years. The ordinary task, the boring middle of the process, the part nobody photographs. He had never once fired a weapon in his professional life. He had never threatened anybody. He had spent a career being the reason that terrible things stayed quiet, and he had made $340,000 a year doing it, and he had a daughter at Vanderbilt. He set the crate down. He straightened up. He put a hand in the small of his back the way men his age do. And Ren Calloway watched him and felt the thing she had been carrying for 14 months go very cold and very simple. Sandoval right at her shoulder. That's him. That's him. He doesn't look like anything. No, Ren said. They never do. That's the entire business model private. If they look like something, somebody would have stopped them a long time ago. Sandoval's hands were shaking. What do we do? And Ren Calloway said very quietly, we wait for him to close the trunk. He made 2 more trips. Ren counted them the way she counted everything without effort and without emotion, and beside her a 19-year-old private stood with his fists closed so hard his knuckles had gone bloodless. And every 40 seconds, Sandoval said under his breath, ma'am, not yet. Ma'am, he's not yet private. He's taking them. Yes, Ren said, that's what I want. It was the hardest thing she had asked anybody to do all night, and she knew it, and she did not soften it. Standing 40 yards from the man who had built the machine that killed his brother and being told to hold still, Sandoval would tell people years later that it took more out of him than anything that came after. He said it was like being asked to hold a door shut while somebody screamed on the other side. He's got seals in that bag, Ren said quietly. UN-issued federal seals. That's the thing you can't argue with. That's the piece that doesn't have a lawyer. And if he doesn't put the bag in the trunk, then he keeps it on his shoulder, Ren said, and that's better. At 20:54, Nash came back along the row bent almost double and dropped in beside them. Ma'am, talk. 4 crates in the trunk, 2 on the back seat. Nash's voice was pitched up thin. And I got the stamp. Ma'am, I got the stamp. It's 4471. It's the same lot. I'm certain I could read it off the end grain. Are you certain or are you sure? Nash stopped. That question landed in him like a punch, because it was the question, the only question, and it was the one nobody had asked him in 14 years of handling other people's equipment. I'm certain, he said. I'll say it under oath. It's 451. Then that's yours now, Ren said. That sentence belongs to you. Don't let anybody talk you out of it, and don't let anybody make it bigger. You read a stamp, you know what it said. That's all you have to hold. Nash nodded. He was crying a little and did not seem to know it. Then Rourke came up the row at a dead sprint, and Ren knew before she got there that something had gone wrong. He's not alone. Say it. Second vehicle just came through the north gate on a Meridian Halcyon badge. Rourke was gulping air. 2 men, panel van. They're headed for the inspection lane. How long? 3 minutes, maybe less. And that was the moment the entire night turned, because Ren Calloway had built her plan on 1 man in a trunk, and 1 man in a trunk was about to become 3 men in a van, and 3 men in a van was not evidence. 3 men in a van was a legitimate corporate recovery operation with a filed hold and paperwork, and every crate would be in the back of that van in 11 minutes and gone. Ma'am, Rourke said. Ma'am, we have to move now. No, he'll be gone. If we move now, we're 14 soldiers charging a lawful compliance hold. Ren's voice did not change at all. That's an assault report and a lawsuit, and it's over. Sergeant, what's the Northgate procedure for a contractor vehicle after 2000? Rourke blinked. What? The gate. What does a guard do at night with a contractor plate? He scans the badge logs, the plate checks the manifest. Does he check the manifest? Rourke stopped. Does he check the manifest, Sergeant, or does he wave it through because it's Friday and the badge is good? And Rourke, who had spent 9 years being the hardest person in every room specifically because she knew exactly how these things actually worked, said, he waves it. Then get on your phone and tell that gate to check the manifest. Ren said, every line, slowly, twice. Rourke was dialing before she finished the sentence. The van sat at the north gate for 9 minutes. 9 minutes while a 19-year-old guard with a clipboard went down a manifest line by line at the specific unhurried pace of a man who has just been told by a staff sergeant that his career depends on being thorough. and two Meridian Halcyon contractors sat in a vehicle 40 feet inside the fence and could not do a single thing about it. That was the night. That was the whole night in the end. Not a fight, a clipboard. And 2 rows over, Julian Pike closed his trunk. Isha, now, Wren said. She came out from the stack, and she walked, did not run straight down the middle of the lane, with Sandoval on her left and Hollis on her right, and 11 more behind them, and Pike heard boots and turned around with his hand still on the trunk lid. He did the most human thing he did all night. He smiled. Evening, he said, Mr. Pike. That's right. He straightened. He put both hands loosely in his pockets, and he rocked back on his heels, and it was a performance so practiced that even Wren felt the pull of it. You folks lost. This is a bonded area. You've got 4 crates in that trunk, Wren said. I've got a compliance hold filed at 1959 on material belonging to my company, and I've got documentation for every piece of it. He was still smiling. You want to see it? I'll show you. I'll show you all of it. That's the thing people never understand about my job, ma'am. I want you to look. I know, Wren said. That's why I let you finish loading. The smile stayed, but something behind his eyes shifted a quarter inch, and Sandoval saw it, and Sandoval said afterward that it was the first moment he understood he was watching something being won. You've got a bag on your shoulder, Wren said. Pike didn't move. Federal container seals, she said. Issued, sequential. I'd guess between 15 and 30 of them because that's how they come, and because a man like you doesn't carry a partial box. And you've got a set of bolt cutters somewhere in that vehicle, and you've got a laptop with a terminal client on it that logged into the Halloran Point property book at 1951 under a staff sergeant's credentials that you lifted off her keyboard on Tuesday morning while asking her about the coffee machine. Rorke, 10 feet back, made a sound. You can explain the crates, Wren said. You can explain the hold. The hold. Your lawyers will explain the certificate, and they'll do it well, and it'll take 3 years, and they might even win. But there is no explanation on this earth for why a compliance officer has a box of issued seals in a bag at 9 o'clock at night. Pike's smile finally went. You're the 12th, he said. Wren didn't answer. I read the file 11 days ago. He said it almost conversationally. I read all 12 files, actually. Standard practice. And there's a note in yours from a flight surgeon. Did you know that a note that says you were considered a retention risk? That you'd expressed, and I'm quoting from memory, persistent ideation regarding accountability. Hollis took a step forward. Wren put an arm out without looking. Which is doctor language, Pike said. For this one won't let go, and I want you to understand, petty officer, that I didn't hide from you. I sat in your chow hall for 11 days. I ate the same food because I have done this for a very long time. And I have never once, not once, met a person who could stay angry for 14 months about something that already happened. You met 11 of them, Wren said. You just never had to look at any of them. That's very good, Pike said. That'll play well. It's not for playing. Everything's for playing. And here he leaned in slightly, and his voice dropped, and for the first time all night, the ordinariness came off him and something underneath showed. You think this ends here? There are 400 people at Meridian Halcyon who go to work on Monday. There are contracts in 11 countries. I am a line item, ma'am. They'll pay for my defense for about 6 weeks, and then they'll issue a statement with the word rogue in it, and the testing regime will get renamed and re-audited, and it will keep running, and in 3 years there will be another lot, and another Thursday afternoon, and another tired colonel. I know, Wren said. Pike stopped. I know, she said again. I've read the org chart. I know exactly how small you are. Then why are you here? And Wren Calloway said, because the 11 weren't line items either. There were 14 soldiers standing in that lane, and not one of them made a sound. Sandoval hung up beside her without permission, and he was staring at the man who had been in a chow hall reading a newspaper while a room full of people laughed at the woman who carried his brother's name, and everything in his 19-year-old body was screaming at him to move. He didn't. Private Sandoval, Wren said. Ma'am. Say the name. Sandoval's chest hitched. Say it to him, out loud. And Eli Sandoval said Marcus Sandoval. Pike looked at him. There was nothing in his face. Sergeant Nash. Ma'am. What did you read on that crate? Lot 4471, Nash said, loud enough to carry. Sergeant Hollis. Hollis's voice came out of him like it had been dragged. I signed for 9 crates of lot 4471 at this installation 6 weeks ago, and I never opened one of them. And I signed 7 of them back out to the yard in April, and I never opened those either. Sergeant Rourke. My login altered a federal seal number at 1951 tonight, Rourke said. And I was nowhere near a terminal, and I'll testify to where I was and who saw me. And Wren turned back to Julian Pike. That's 4 sworn statements from 4 people who all have something to lose by giving them, she said. That's the part your model doesn't have an answer for. You built a machine that runs on people not wanting trouble. You never planned for a room full of people who already had it. The Naval Criminal Investigative Service arrived at 2118. There was no drama in it at all. 2 sedans and an unmarked van, 6 people in windbreakers, and a supervisory agent named Delacroix who had been on the phone with Colonel Abram Teague since 2007 and who walked into that lane already knowing every name. They took the bag first. Wren watched them do it. 22 federal container seals sequential issued in a black nylon case with a foam insert, and the agent who logged them held the case up in gloved hands and said 22 out loud for the recorder. And that number 22, not the 11, not the 14 months, just 22, was the number that eventually put Julian Pike in a federal facility in Kentucky for the rest of his natural life. They cuffed him against the trunk he had just closed. I didn't fight. Men like Pike never fight. He turned his head as they walked him past, and he found Wren in the group, and he said without any particular malice, "You know I'm not the worst thing that happened to those men." "No," Wren said. "You're just the only part of it I could reach." Have you ever noticed that the ending of a real story is always smaller than you expect? Stay with me because there's one more thing on her back that nobody in that lane had noticed yet. Colonel Abram Teague gave his statement at 2340 in a conference room at the Port Authority with no lawyer present. Delacroix told him 3 times he could stop. He didn't stop. He talked for 2 hours and 11 minutes, and he did not once use the word unintentional. And when Delacroix finally said near the end, "Sir, you understand you're building the case against yourself," Teague said, "I understand that 11 men are dead, and I signed a piece of paper that let it keep happening. I'm not going to sit here and haggle over what percentage of that is mine." He was relieved of command 8 days later. He did not appeal it. At the congressional subcommittee hearing the following spring, a senator gave him a very generous opening, asked whether he had been deceived, whether the contractor rep had misrepresented the testing status, whether he'd been given false assurances. Teague said, "Senator, that's all true, and it isn't the point. It took me 4 seconds. 41 items in a stack, and mine was number 19, and I gave it 4 seconds because I wanted to get to my daughter's recital. I've had 31 years and a lot of training to make me the kind of officer who reads number 19. I wasn't. That's not a deception. That's just what I am on a Thursday." The clip of that answer ran 9 million times. 240 defense procurement officers across 4 branches were required to watch it as part of mandatory training the following year. It is still shown. It is called informally in about a dozen commands, the Thursday briefing. Dane Hollis was reduced to sergeant, then to specialist, and then he was gone. He did not fight any of it. He gave 4 separate statements, each one worse for him than the last. And at the second one, an investigator stopped the tape and said, "Sergeant, you're allowed to say you don't remember." And Hollis said, "I remember fine. I just never looked." The video went out anyway, 9 seconds of it, a big man in a chow hall saying strip twice and a small woman turning around in 11 names. It got 4 million views in a week. It got him letters. It got his daughter a conversation at school that he would have crawled over broken glass to prevent and could not. He wrote to Wren Calloway once, he never sent it. He wrote to Eli Sandoval's mother instead, a 2-page letter that said in essence that he had signed for the crates and not opened them and that he was sorry and he did not ask for anything and he did not explain himself. She wrote back 4 months later, 2 lines. "Thank you for telling me. Nobody else did." He kept it in his wallet until it came apart at the folds. He works maintenance at a high school now in the same town, and every year on the anniversary, he mails an envelope to an address in Ohio and does not expect a reply, and he has never once told anyone at that school what he used to do for a living. Camille Rourke was formally reprimanded for making a false statement regarding a chain of custody document in the presence of 200 witnesses. It cost her the promotion list. It cost her 9 years of trajectory. She had asked Wren for a soft landing, and Wren had told her no, and Wren had told the investigators exactly what Rourke had done. Both halves, the lie and the run, and the board weighed both, and the lie weighed more. She stayed in. That was the thing nobody expected. She had every reason to get out, and she stayed, and she asked for and got the equipment certification instructor, billet at Halloran Point, which is a dead-end job that nobody wants, and she has taught it for years now. She opens every class the same way. Every single one, every rotation, no exceptions. She says, "My name is Sergeant First Class Camille Rourke. 4 years ago, I held a document in my hands with my supervisor's name on it, and I read it, and I understood it, and then I told a room full of people it was junk. Nobody made me do that. Nobody threatened me. I did it because I wanted him to like me more than I wanted to be right. That's it. That's the whole reason. And 11 men were already dead when I did it." Then she says, "Now open your books to the seal verification annex, because that's the part that would have caught it. Nobody sleeps in her class. That's not a figure of speech. In 4 years, nobody has ever slept in her class." Tobias Nash never told the 18-second story again. Hunt tells a different one now. He tells it to every new arrival in his section on their first day, and it goes, "I ran a table at Bragg for 11 months, and I handled a rifle 30 times without once reading the stamp on the receiver. Because the stamp is for the property book, and the property book is for the office. A woman told me which weapon to take out of my own cage before I opened it, and I did not ask myself how she knew, because I was busy being impressed. Read the stamp. I'm a master sergeant. He is by universal account the most irritating man in the armory, and he does not care." They put up a wall at Halloran Point 11 months after. It was Teague who started the paperwork for it before he was relieved, which took a particular kind of nerve for a man who knew exactly what his own name was going to look like in the same story. It was Rourke who pushed it through afterward, and she pushed it through the way she does everything now, which is loudly and without asking anybody to like her. 11 names in a single vertical column. Same order, same typeface. Corporal Eli Sandoval, corporal now 21 years old, fast-tracked with a reputation among the junior enlisted for being the one who will actually go to bat for you, was standing in front of it on the anniversary when Wren Calloway came up beside him. She had not been on the installation in 7 months. She did not explain how she'd known he'd be there. They stood for a while without talking. "Ma'am," Sandoval said eventually, "can I ask you the thing I've never asked you?" "Yes." "If Hollis hadn't done it," he kept his eyes on the wall, "if nobody had said a word to you that night, if you'd just eaten your food and walked out, would you have ever taken your shirt off?" And Wren said no. Sandoval closed his eyes. "Never," she said, "not once. 9 days in, and my whole plan was to stay invisible for another 4 weeks, get the second lot's testing records out of Georgia, and hand a package to a prosecutor who would have spent 18 months deciding whether to open it. And in that 18 months, Pike moves the third lot and the fourth, and Meridian Halcyon reorganizes, and the paper trail goes into a warehouse." So Sandoval's voice went strange. "So Hollis." "Dane Hollis put 11 names on camera in front of 200 witnesses," Wren said, "and made it impossible for anyone anywhere to file this quietly. He did the single most useful thing anybody did that night, and he did it because he was cruel, and he will never get 1 ounce of credit for it, and he shouldn't." Sandoval let out a breath that shook. "Then it stays what it is," he said. "Yes." "Ma'am, my brother's name is on a wall because a guy tried to humiliate you." "Your brother's name is on a wall," Wren said, "because 11 men died and somebody wouldn't stop asking about it. Everything else is just how the door happened to open." She looked at him. "Don't put that on Hollis. He'd take it, and it isn't his." Here's the thing that almost nobody knows and that only 3 people on Earth have ever seen. 11 months after the port, Wren Calloway went back to the same artist in Virginia Beach and had the column altered. Not the names. The names stayed exactly as they were, in exactly the order they went out the door, because that order was the only thing she had ever been able to keep straight in 14 months of not sleeping. She had the date removed. It had been at the bottom under the 11th line, the date of the jump, the date of the accident, the date she had been carrying like a stone. She had it taken off and replaced with a different date entirely, and the artist asked her what it was, and Wren told him, and he stopped working for a second. It was the date of a Friday night in a chow hall. Not because it was a victory. She was very clear about that with the two people she ever explained it to. It was because for 14 months she had defined her own life by the worst thing that had happened to her, and she had gone into that mess hall as a woman built entirely out of an accident, and she had come out of it as a woman who had gotten something done in public with the help of four people who all had reasons not to help her. The accident was what happened to her. The Friday was what she did about it. Meridian Halcyon Group settled the civil suit 2 years later for an amount that was never made public, which is the kind of sentence that always means large. Their testing division was dissolved. The parent company survived because they always do, and it operates today under a name that is not Meridian Halcyon and does not appear in any of the coverage. 400 people went to work on Monday exactly as Julian Pike had said, and most of them had never heard of Lot 4471 and never will. Ren knew that would happen. She had known it standing in the lane. She has been asked in the years since whether it was worth it. She has been asked by lawyers and by reporters, and once memorably by a therapist who did not last. Her answer never changes, and it is not the answer people want. They were going to say it was a training accident, she says. That was the whole file. That was going to be the permanent, official, forever version that 11 men got themselves killed being careless. Marcus Sandoval's mother was going to go to her grave believing her son made a mistake. And then she says, now the record says what actually happened. That's not everything. It's just the only part that was ever available. The phone in the flat pocket at the small of her back has gone off more than once since. Another lot number, another port, another Thursday afternoon somewhere in a stack of 41 items with a tired signature going down on line 19. She pulls her ponytail tight and she goes, because 200 people once watched a man look at a 5'3" woman in a flea market t-shirt and decide she was nothing. And she led him for 11 days through every insult all the way to the word strip for one reason and one reason only. Being underestimated was never the thing that happened to Ren Calloway. It was the weapon she brought.